Welcome, everyone, to the Culinary Now podcast. I'm Jamie Schick,
And I'm Matt Britt.
and it is 2025. And that means that all of the reports on what's going to be trending this year are coming out and available. And today we're going to look at what the projected trends for this year are.
Love it, Jamie. This is like my favorite time of the year because it makes me feel old because I am not as in touch with food trends as I used to be in industry. But you know what? We're gonna give
Yeah,
it a
so
shot
this
anyway.
will this will be good for both of us. So I looked at four different resources that were providing what they thought was going to be trending in 2025. So I consulted Food and Wine, the Next Flavor Report, the NRA, and the ACF. And there were a lot of repeats on these, and I think we just kind of dive right in with what they're saying. And well, we're going to start with the first one I saw, and this was repeated in a lot of these sources, was florals. So things like edible flowers and rose, elderflower, cherry blossom, hibiscus, lavender, those type of floral flavors. But they were saying these flavors specifically in drinks.
Mm. I feel like we've
And it
seen this
kind
before too, right? I mean, like,
yes, it made me think of like Starbucks's lavender latte that they had in the spring.
that's what, and I love about this is it kind of lends itself naturally to mocktails, which I think specifically
Definitely.
January, people might be doing a dry January. People might be speaking, hey, I'm cutting down on alcohol. I just feel like that's a common thing you hear. And, hibiscus alone, I just think it's such an amazing, not only does it look pretty, but it's an amazing flavor to infuse into like a lemonade or an iced tea, or even to do something kind of like bubbly with like ginger beer. I think it's really fun.
For sure. I totally agree. And I also, so using edible flowers as garnish on drinks or in desserts, I think all of these florals really lend themselves to desserts as well and can be really universal. So I think this is a great one. And I'm excited to see how this kind of transforms this
Yeah,
year.
the only like I guess caveat I would kind of throw out there for people that are maybe kind of starting to explore edible flowers is they look really pretty. So it's easy to put them on a plate to make it more visually stunning. But like it is important to make sure that whatever flavor that flower has goes with the dish. I think that that's something that
Yes.
could be maybe a sort of a rookie mistake a little bit is like, just the idea of throwing like micro something on a plate because it looks good. It also needs to be functional. It really needs to add to the sort of overall end result of that dish. So that's my only kind of warning.
No, I totally agree. Floral flavors like flowers can be really hard to work with because they can taste like soap if you don't use them correctly. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's some great advice.
What's next, Jamie? What else is on this list?
All right, so the next one that was also really repeated in all these sources was this idea of fusion, and
Ugh.
specifically a heavy emphasis on an Asian fusion. So things like Korean Hawaiian barbecue or Japanese Peruvian cuisine or Indonesian Chinese, like all of these like Asian fusion style cuisines are really really popping up in every article that's going to be trending this year.
So here's my question because like are we really doing this? Like, are we going down this road of like sort of? I mean, for years we were beaten with the idea that fusion it's an F word. It's bad. It's not necessarily something that you do because it's not accurate or authentic and it kind of bastardizes like sort of the cuisine. But I agree. I've seen this. So like, are we really doing this? Are we going down this road where we're just kind of mashing things together to get kind of something that's like quote new?
I mean, it seems like it's never going away. Like fusion's been around for a long
It
time. I
has,
think
yeah.
it was big in the early 2000s and as we know, trends are cyclical and I don't think it's ever actually gone away. I just think we shied away from it for a little bit being like you said, being like, "Oh, this is bad. This is not authentic." But with the way like the US is a melting pot, we're always going to have a fusion cuisine everywhere just because of the variety of cultures that we have here. It's inevitable. So I think having this just be a trend, I think having it not be such a bad thing going into 2025
Mm.
is I think it's going to be nice. It's going to be I think it's going what I think it's going to do is bring new flavors and new flavor combinations forward that maybe we aren't familiar with or we haven't seen, and I think that's going to be really inspiring.
And I guess this has happened even when we have been avoiding it as, sort of the culinary industry. It's been happening naturally forever. I mean, the East Asia influence in Peruvian
Mm-hmm.
cuisine has shaped that cuisine. It's like kasushi, which is like that sushi roll made with causa potatoes instead of rice. I mean, that's a real thing. I mean, not necessarily my favorite, but it's a real thing in Peru. So I guess it's sort of, I'm okay with this if, so long as you kind of celebrate sort of the diaspora like connections of like why that food lends itself to this place. Like why does Japan work in Peru? Like what is sort of the path it took to get there? I could probably talk myself into it, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just an old curmudgeon purist and I just don't like fusion. But it's a trend. We're embracing it. We're embracing it.
Yeah, we'll see where it goes. Like I said, I think that it could be really inspiring. I think seeing new flavors or being reminded of flavors that I've forgotten about. And if you think about it,
Mm.
we kind of use some of these flavors anyway, and I just think putting them in the forefront, I'm excited. I think all of these trends are going to be really,
Yep.
really great this year. And the next one I want to talk about is actually, so the next flavor report, they actually put an emphasis on what Gen Z is loving and will continue to love. And I loved that take on what the trends are going to be. So
Sure.
one of the big things that they were saying is complex heat. So spice that complements the flavors and doesn't overpower. And this is 100% my type of heat, especially in desserts. Like I do
Mm.
not like when desserts are so spicy that you can't taste anything, or food in general. So I think that this is right up my alley, like complex heat, complementing and not overpowering. And as someone who's not a spice eater, I can't wait to see how this one plays out. Now, I know you do like a little spice. So
I
what are
do.
you thinking about this?
But I think that this, you kind of have to parse this out a little bit because I think when I want heat, I will have my favorite bottle of hot sauce and I can apply that to get that kind of scorching uh like burn that I do like from time to time, especially on certain things, maybe like a buffalo wing, what have you.
Mhm.
Um, that said, I like this because yes, it does target what the next generation of consumers are going to be spending their money on and what they want. But I also think that it is giving people permission to kind of understand how heat can really work for something. And I look at Szechuan or Indian cuisine, which can be ungodly spicy, but like the real great stuff is balanced. It has nuances. It has this sort of incremental heat that kind of builds up and doesn't necessarily overpower unless that's the purpose of the dish.
Yeah, and the other thing with heat is this article goes on to talk about that they're going to want heat, like sweet and spicy. So they're going to want like these two different flavors combined, or sweet and salty. And those, I love a sweet and salty. So
100%.
having the combination and a little bit of sweet in your heat, like a hot honey, I think balances beautifully because you're including multiple tastes. And we know that multiple tastes are going to make things taste more delicious, be more satisfying. And sweet, salty, sweet, spicy, those are also, I think, going to be trending a little bit more.
And to put this on the savory side, the sweet and salty thing is a no brainer, right? It's
Right, right.
by far probably the most popular combo, in the Western palate. And the way that you can really make people annoyed with this is they know they like sweet and salty together, but you can throw out something that will make them rethink it. And they might say they don't like this, but when they think about why the flavors work, it's important. Is someone who is adamantly against Hawaiian pizza, pork and pineapple on a pizza. When they think about it, like it is the best flavor combination on a pizza because it is sweet, it is salty, and it is delicious. Now, yes, it's weird, but it is by far, in my humble opinion, the best pizza out there because it hits
Agreed.
those flavor marks.
I am team pineapple on pizza for sure. And pineapple also brings a little sour, so we get a little sour in there too. I think it's like a flavor bomb if you get a Hawaiian pizza. Like so much incredible, like variety of flavor in there. Oh man, now you're making me hungry for lunch.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more food trends. All right, Jamie. So, what else is trending in 2025?
All right. The other thing, and I'm going to stay on the next flavor report for one last trend that I want to talk about, which is fruit and
Mm,
specifically dragon fruit, guava, and passion fruit. And again, I think we saw Starbucks doing this with their dragon fruit refresher that they had or they still have. And so I think they kind of jumped on it a little bit early, but I think it's going to blow up with these more, I don't want to use the word exotic, but these more unusual fruits that we aren't seeing a lot of currently. So I and it, as we look at desserts, like I know dragon
mm,
fruit doesn't have a big flavor payoff. It's kind of neutral, but it looks really awesome on a plate and does provide a little bit of texture. Guava and passion fruit, amazing for some nice acidic tart flavors.
hmm.
And they really do go with so much. Everything from chocolate to coconut to vanilla, like everything. Literally, they go with everything. So I think fruit forward for desserts, especially these fruits, visually and taste wise, is going to be really nice.
Yeah, and I think that you're right. They kind of lend themselves to the pastry world, but thinking about different parts of the world, Latin America, like guava, like passion fruit, like
Hmm.
they have savory applications, and you're right that that sort of kind of acidic, sweet, punch. I liken it almost to like tamarind. It can be a really
Yes.
good, which is something I know we talked about. Like I think last year in trends is, it's something
Yeah.
that can really provide nuance and depth and broaden sauce creation, which I think is really cool. Let alone, I'm a little old school. I love a good gastrique, on things, and
Yep.
this is natural for that. Here's my question because where people you might see these at the store. You might see a dragon fruit or a guava or what have you, and if you feel up the courage to buy that and use it, great. But what's your take on purees? Because I think that that's a pretty approachable way to get this product into things. Like, are pureed is pureed passion fruit, pureed guava? Is that a no go, or are you given permission to do that?
I think purees are an awesome thing to use. There are companies who make really high quality purees with very low sugar. It's just fruit pureed at its peak and preserves the flavor. Now, I've seen passion fruits in the grocery store here at my house, but I would have to buy a lot of them and juice a lot of them to get a liquid if I wanted to do anything with
Uh-huh.
it liquid if I didn't want to eat the actual seeds. And I think that could be maybe intimidating for a home cook or someone who's never used a fresh passion fruit before.
For
So I
sure.
think purees or even passion fruit juice, 100% juice, 100% guava juice is a great way to utilize them. And we were talking a lot about beverages and what a great way to make like a mimosa or a lemonade using these purees would be delicious. So yeah, I am 100% team puree. I think it's a great way to go if you have access to them. Otherwise, I think 100% juice, if you can find them in the grocery store, that's a good substitute if you're doing this at home.
Yeah, and it's also kind of a good bang for your buck because I what's not on this list, but mango, for example, the yield on
Mhm.
a mango sucks. It's like, and to buy it, to actually wait till it ripens properly, then you have to get the skin off. And if you haven't peeled a mango before when it's ripe, it can be a little bit challenging. As silly as that sounds, it is. And then you
Mhm.
cut down and you have this massive pit that you can do nothing with besides just kind of like gnaw the remaining flesh off of. You get more yield out of just the puree. So I think that, and you can freeze it. You don't have to use it all at one time. Like I just think that approachability. I'm on the same page with you. Purees, good to go.
All right. So then if we go into what the NRA and the ACF, they both did almost like top 10 lists. And some of these
Mm.
again are repeats from what we've already talked about, but I think there are some that we should really highlight. And I think the first one being sustainability and local sourcing. This isn't going
Mm.
anywhere. It's going to stay here, continuing on, getting I think more and more prevalent in our day-to-day lives, just really honing in on how can we be sustainable, what can we source locally.
Mm. I like that, and the sustainability thing is. I think it's more difficult as a sort of home cooked consumer than maybe it is if you're a chef, because chefs are given a lot of freedom to kind of create their own menu and to prioritize what they want. But when you're buying groceries for the family, and maybe you have young kids and variety might not necessarily be your thing, it's tough not to buy strawberries in December, because your kids love strawberries, even though we know probably not the most sustainable thing. One of the things I like here, and I don't think it's on the list, but I'm going to add it to the list if they would ask, is dried fruits. I think dried fruits are fantastic, and figuring out ways to incorporate them into or to replace fresh fruit options, I think should be a trend. So a good example, in my class, we were talking about this before we recorded. We're doing a creme brulee, and oftentimes creme brulee comes with fresh fruit on the top, right? Now it's January. I'm not going to buy raspberries or strawberries or blueberries because they're not in season. But we did source a lot of dried fruit, and now we're reconstituting those, and we're making compotes and things like that. That is kind of seasonally appropriate. Fearing that you might completely destroy that idea as the pastry chef. What are your thoughts on dry fruits?
Well, I like them. I I think they have a place in desserts, and I think if we're looking at the second part of this trend, which would be local sourcing, I would say, yeah, maybe strawberries and blueberries aren't available, but what are the local options? What can we get? What is being
Sure.
provided? Can we use cranberries? Are those available? Can we use apples or pears? Are those available? I mean, right now in the dead of January, maybe not, but those could also be great options. I also think frozen fruit. So dried fruit, but also frozen
Mm,
fruit is a great way to go, because
yeah.
just like purees, frozen fruit, it's quick frozen. It's frozen at its height of deliciousness. I have frozen berries in my freezer right now that I use in oatmeal in the morning when the
Yep.
fresh ones aren't so great. So I think frozen is a good option. Dried fruit has a place. It definitely dried fruit provides a nice chew, a nice texture. So it's another textural element to add on a plate. So I think as long as you're using them appropriately, I don't see why not. I mean, it's a great way to dried fruit is a great way to preserve fruit. It's a nice
Mm.
preservation technique.
Yeah, and I like the frozen angle too. And weirdly, my kids actually prefer frozen mango over fresh mango, which is kind of strange. I don't particularly choose that path, but I always have frozen fruit in my freezer exactly for this time of year, because, again, sourcing things at their peak or in a responsible way, it's hard as a chef to go into a grocery store and buy something that's blatantly out of season and probably traveled thousands of miles, contributing massive
Yeah.
problems, blah, blah, blah. It's tough to do that. So the frozen angle, I like the dried angle. I think those are great, especially as someone who packs kids' lunches. Throw some dried
Mhm.
fruit in there. It's a great way to go. Um, Love that. Love the sustainability. Always a thing for us.
Now, this next one kind of ties into that, but showing up on both of these like top 10 lists is going to be fermented and pickled food. So,
Mm,
looking at other preservation techniques, right? Pickling vegetables or fruits for storage for longer periods of time, and fermented foods, really getting those probiotics. Kind of, it could kind of take a health turn here, but I think also this is in that sustainability bucket, and pickled food and fermented foods are really on both lists, and I think they're going to continue on. And I'm not against a fermented or pickled item on a dessert. I
you know,
think delicious.
I'm so happy these the fermentation obviously has been on trendy lists for forever now,
Mhm.
for the last, I don't know what, decade. And I'm happy that it's still there, because preservation, kind of sustainability aside, which, yes, it is an amazing way to extend the life of something. But what this does, maybe better than, let's just say, freezing, right? Or the frozen fruit, frozen peas type thing, is it actually improves the flavor oftentimes. The fermentation, the
Yeah.
creation of those nuanced, new kind of funky, if you will. And I know we're talking about like certain things, like fermented cabbage to me is better than cabbage. Now obviously there's other players there. There's spice involved. There's things like that, but it can really bring an ingredient into new light, which I think is justifiably the reason it should remain on this list. Everyone should know how to properly ferment without killing someone or turning it into booze, unless that's your style. Um, but yeah, well deserved, and maybe focus a little bit more on the pickling. I think fermentation
Yeah.
kind of is in the the heavyweight class, and pickling kind of falls behind. I think a good quick pickle is something that you can do easily, and it makes a huge difference, specifically because you can cut down on the amount of sodium that you're consuming. Store
Mhm.
bought pickles are horrible for you. They have so much salt in them. And I think doing it at home allows you to be in more control, which, as we get older, sodium doesn't always align with the body. So something to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last one I want to talk about, and this kind of goes into our last episode, but the ACF highlighted this one specifically, and they said culinary tech integrations
Mm,
and things like using AI or connected cooking, like we were talking about with Dan from Rationale
rationale,
last
yeah.
week. Uh, I think we're going to see more AI use in the kitchen. And I think as you and I are a little bit older, and for me, it's a little bit harder. It's a little bit harder to think about how am I going to use AI in the kitchen? But we both teach in a master's program to want to like to aspiring teachers, and I want to think of ways how can we include AI in our kitchen? And one of the ways I have started using it is having it help me, my students come up with flavor ideas or dish ideas.
Sure.
They can use it because at the end of the day, the technology cannot cook the dish. The student still has to cook the dish. They still have to modify to make it fit whatever we're doing, but to use it to help you brainstorm ideas, dish ideas, component ideas, flavor combinations
Sure.
has been really helpful. And they're not always great. I'm just going to say that they're a little dated, but it gets the ball rolling. It gets my wheels turning and using it to help with creating a name of a dish. If you're
Yeah,
trying to come up with a way to name it or a concept idea and you can say, I don't like that, give it to me again, or oh, I like that. That gives me an idea. I'm going to change it. So I really like it for the brainstorming
for
aspect
sure.
personally. But then we look at the connected cooking aspect that we talked about with Dan last week and all these other like technological advances that we're going to see in our cooking equipment. I mean, I think yeah, this is definitely the future.
So yes, I the AI thing. I agree that it can break up writer's block, right? And
Mhm.
anyone who, I mean, I don't know. I would say most people that tell you they don't use it either are lying to you or they should, because I think in a world of constantly moving ideas, like having something that can um, kind of provide alternate options. Of course, you have to cite it. You shouldn't just claim it as your own. All the responsibility stuff connected to that.
Of course.
It's important. I use it in my class and have my students use it in a way that kind of helps them absorb and do all the things that a chef needs to do that they're not necessarily trained to do, right? So creating menu designs or building websites, or one of the assignments in my class is to make a cookbook. A, a chef is not automatically a graphic designer, right? So having AI as a sort of visual jumpstart to kind of create themes and help capture your cooking philosophy, I think is a really powerful tool for someone who arguably has a ton of things going on in their brain. They're focused on, the food, obviously, but then they're, the food safety, and then they're focused on the cost. And there's all these things connected to being a chef outside of cooking. I think AI can make your life easier, right? And no doubt when we were, first shown this, which was like a year ago or whatever, I think most people like kind of push back a little bit. They're like, no, you can't. But that's not how the world
Yes.
works. Like you have to like, if you're not evolving, you're dying. It's like it's and in the world of food, like things happen. We do a trends episode every year because the trends, kind of change every year. So you have to stay up on the pace. From a sort of go ahead, Jamie.
I was just thinking, this makes me think of a few years ago, Vitamix came out with a scale that is it's a connected to an app. And Vitamix came out with a scale that you can connect to an app with recipes, and your phone will kind of go off when you reach the amount of ingredient needed for that recipe. And it's a totally connected way to cook. And I thought it was cool at the time, but I never really used it. And I still have the scale. But I think things like that, using apps for monitoring temperatures, for scaling
Mm-hmm.
ingredients, and having your phone like tell you, okay, great, what's next, and be able to scale a phone. I think the Bluetooth integration, using it for thermometers, for refrigerator and freezer temperatures, I think that would it's going to be really helpful going forward. That it's connected to an app on your phone. It can let you know when a fridge goes down immediately, a freezer goes down, when when you have something cooking and it's at temp and you can pull it out. And we always have our phones on us, so I think seeing more integration like that is
Mm.
also going to help us going forward.
Yeah, I know. I 100% agree. The connected cooking angle, massive. You know, the last thing I kind of want to talk about, and it's in the same breath as sort of technology, is the idea of electrification, right? Going electric. Like, are we ready as chefs to put aside the gas? And what I mean by that is, Erin and I were thinking about redoing the kitchen. My brain is wired to automatically say I want a gas stove, even though for the last 10 years I've had an electric stove at the house. Um, you know, I'm kind of at the point, and you can connect any sort of safety or health concerns related to pumping propane into the house with young kids, whatever. Um, I think I'm going electric. I think I'm scrapping the gas, and I'm going either induction or just electric. And you know what? My reason, number one, back to what we talked about with Dan on rationale, sometimes electric can kind of boil water faster or it's more accurate. I think about induction, right? You take a pot off the induction, the burner cools down almost instantly, right? And I have young kids. It just, for me, that's safety, right? They don't touch the stove. It's not hot. Um, but my reason for doing it is it's just so easy to clean. Like, and that's such like a lazy thing to say, but like, I would rather forego the idea of cooking with fire inside. Outside's different, but just for the cleaning benefit alone. And I know that's a pretty low innovation, but like, listen, when you got stuff going on, you're busy, that makes a huge difference.
Going electric is actually on our list. It's going to be a trend, I think, but I think it's going to come with a learning curve of learning how to cook on electric if you've been doing gas for so long, because it's going to hold heat. You don't just
Mm.
turn it off and use heat. It's going to hold the heat a little bit longer, and I think that it's it's a little bit of a learning curve on how to get used to it, but I think the benefits will be there, I assume. We have a gas stove, but an electric oven,
Mm.
and I love that combo. I'm a big fan of it, and if I mean, that's also honestly, that's also what came with our house, but if we had to do an electric, I would definitely do flat top, not the coil.
Oh yeah. Yeah, only flat top, and like that's where I'm saying like those coils. Yeah, like I go back to like the days of like that was what you had, and foil pans
Yeah, yeah,
underneath.
yeah.
Those are not necessarily the safest thing, but like real modern induction, like it's instantly hot, it's instantly cooled down afterwards, or pretty quick. You'd be surprised. It's pretty hard to find an aluminum pan these days. So people that would say, oh, my pans don't work on electric, they're kind of full of shit, because most pans are stainless steel anyway, cast iron, copper, like those are all really beneficial to that type of kind of magnet based heat generation. Um, I would say electric's the way to go, although I'm not sure kind of where other areas exist that you would make such a dramatic jump. I think electricity is obviously
Yeah.
part of the kitchen from anything you plug in. So I think the final frontier on that is exactly that. It's bye bye gas. And especially like in my town, we don't have gas on the street. So if I was to put gas in my house, I'd have to bury, a 400-pound propane tank in the backyard. And like, that just seems like too much work if for something that
Mm.
honestly, I'm not sure it's that big of a difference. And I know that's probably an unpopular take, but probably the best way to end the episode is me saying something that's pretty stupid. So, on that note, till next year, Trends 2026. This was fun.
It was. And we didn't cover all of them. We picked out some of the ones we thought were
Mm.
going to be most prevalent and maybe the biggest ones, most important. Feel free to look at any of these lists. We can link all of the sources below if you want to check out the list in more detail, because there's a lot more we didn't even cover. But we'll see how these trends transpire over 2025. And yeah, we'll definitely keep an eye on it.
All right, more to come.